So, thank you all for tuning in to yet another episode in which I talk about issues related to public transportation. I've been thinking what to talk about, and I decided instead of talking about past or even present, I'm going to talk about the future. Future is important, and I say this while currently looking for apartments in Berlin, which is very nice. By nice, I mean, do you enjoy dealing with Vogon bureaucracy? That kind of nice. Anyway, so the future is on my mind, future apartment. Some landlords are asking me to produce a future income contract that does not exist yet. But the future income contract doesn't exist yet, but that will be resolved, but the grant exists. So let's talk about not the entire agenda for the transportation and land use program in 3 years, that's not the right place for it, but about one element of it that I've wanted to do for a while, and that element is how bus redesigns interact with changes to the trains. Now, I talked about how they interact with local rail a couple weeks ago, and instead I'm going to talk about commuter rail, and I'm going to specify Queens, but probably not talk just about that. Queens is just the case that I'm most interested in. We're going to publish on this sometime soon, and soon measured in years, not months. We will likely not do this alone, so if you want to help, you know how to reach me. To be clear, want to help does not mean help me for free. I aim not to have people working for me for free. But anyway, so I kind of want to talk about what this is all about and like how this could generalize. And bear in mind, I say generalize, but I do not know to what extent it generalizes beyond North America. And I like doing things that generalize as much as possible, but this is an American and Canadian dysfunction with how urban commuter rail is treated as not the same as other public transportation. So buses, for example, are not very good at feeding it, and vice versa. Now, in some cases, buses do feed the commuter trains if the commuter train serves some kind of transportation center in a secondary city that has been turned into a suburb. But the timetables will not be compatible in any way. So there might be examples on Long Island, but actually no, the Boston area example is better, of how it's done poorly, where in Brockton, for example, it's probably the best way model for this. It's in Brockton, I don't know why my computer is suddenly making a lot of fan noise. Can you guys hear the fan noise on the computer? Anyway, so Brockton has a bus network comprising, I'm forgetting how many routes, maybe 10, that run all on the same timetable, not the same timetable all day, but during a given time of day, they will all run on the same timetable and they will all pulse at the Brockton train station. I think it's like maybe 35 minutes peak and 50 off peak. It's this weird thing, and that I don't quite get, but anyway. But they pulse at the train station, but they don't pulse with the train. And this is something that's fixable. Like, it absolutely is fixable to make them pulse, and I don't want to talk about it. And I don't want to talk about it on video because I'm pretty sure I've done this already, possibly more than once. Where if the train runs every half hour, all day, every day, and then you can make the buses do that, and there are 2 tracks here, so we have the trains in opposite direction meet here, and then all these buses would meet the train. So this is something that is specifically not done in North America. There are European examples, but it's much more efficient to explain this as a toy example than to go over the European examples, because usually this distance to this large metro area, this distance to this large of an urban core, you'll have something much more complex than 9 routes or however many this is, 9 or 10 or 12, um, and with just one train line, so there's often going to be something weird where the lines go between two parallel train lines, and then they manage to have timed transfers at both ends. It's something that Switzerland does. Oh shit. Okay. Um, I don't know why the noise started. Um, because I don't think I'm using my computer any more intensely than the usual. Um, if I plug in my headphones, will it make things better? Hello, can you hear me? How about now? Okay, it's the same as before? Alright. Is this any different? I'm louder, fan is the same. Okay. This sounds more personal. More personal is good, right? Um, I'm gonna keep. Oh, the reverb is a little strong. Huh. Gonna try one last thing and then give up. How about this? How does this sound? This is the microphone in my camera, so the camera is somewhat farther away. Ugh. Okay, let's just drop the attempt to do this. With headphones, let's just do it this way. Okay. Sorry about this. Anyway, so, going back, I don't want to talk further about suburban issues, but rather the urban issues are, I think, more complex, thus to me more interesting. Um, because there is, for example, a Queen's bus redesign that's in a very advanced stage, and I don't think it's the optimal way to do buses in Queens, even if you ignore what's going on with the LR, but it's actually getting closer. I think with the ETA we called it a two-thirds measure, or maybe I called it two-thirds measure, and people who want to write in more normal English changed it to something else, but the changes that they've made are about a two-thirds measure. Like it's about two-thirds the way from current from the current Queens bus map to what I think the optimum would be. The problem in Queens is that Queens requires a network that is not isotropic. Brooklyn, I always thought was the hardest case because it's the least constrained, in the sense that there are a lot of streets that you could go on, which is why Eric and I published a Brooklyn bus redesign. Eric Goldwyn, Lon Levy. This is what it's called, and this is the link. So, where does the opposition from MTA come from on bus redesign? The MTA does not oppose bus redesigns. The MTA supports bus redesigns, but it does them in the MTA way, which means that they have 12 people doing the job of one. Because they need to pretend that it came from the community and then go through more revision drafts than are needed. I'm not sure what's going on in Queens actually, but I know in Brooklyn they outsourced it to a consultancy that, and then it gives standard American government supervision, which means not a lot, but sometimes a honcho will make unilateral changes. So it's like the problem with the MTA is not that they don't want it. The problem with the MTA is that there are bad at procurement and they're not getting better at procurement. Um, and even the one thing they did right, which was shrinking the footprint of the Second Avenue subway Phase 2 stations, they pretend is something that they pretend it's an idea that they got from the contractors because of design build. Now this is hogwash. I'm pretty sure everyone knows it's hogwash, but John Lieber wants to pretend that he got the idea from the bad contracting method that he is most identified with in New York State, rather than from people who in their sleep would do a better job than he does when he's not sleeping. I'm not actually sure I would do a better job than John Lieber and Jamie Torres-Springer and the other political appointees if I'm sleeping and they're sleeping. But if I'm sleeping and they're awake, then yeah, I'm doing a better job. Anyway, so they are doing a bus redesign. Again, it's a 2/3 measure because it's being designed by committee too much, and that introduces certain frictions. For example, here's a friction. As I said, with Brooklyn, one of the things that I didn't realize, I wanted to pick the hardest borough when I was pitching this. Eric had a different reason to pick Brooklyn, which was he'd done ethnography there before. But I thought this was the hardest challenge, and in many ways it is for route selection. But Brooklyn, and I've said this on stream many times, Brooklyn is a little bit too isotropic. What I mean by isotropic is that the density in Brooklyn doesn't have a very large gradient between inner and outer. Now, downtown Brooklyn has a very large intensity of use, don't get me wrong, but the residential density in these areas, let's say, yeah, it's higher than here, for example. You do notice the drop-off past the IBX route, but it's not a huge drop-off. It's not a huge difference between the density here and the density here. And then at the outer end, there's a fair amount of public housing, so a fair amount of density. Again, less here than here, but not by a very large margin. And this is countermanded by the fact that there's much higher subway density here. So transit demand in, let's say, Bed-Stuy or Williamsburg or the neighborhood that I will keep calling South Brooklyn, even though people at this point give it the early gentrifier names, things like Cobble Hill and Carroll Gardens. What I really mean is the neighborhood that is south of downtown Brooklyn, not Park Slope, and not Red Hook. So this area, South Brooklyn, has a very high transit demand. This is partly due to the high density. No, it's not commuter rail. Commuter rail brain is the segregation of commuter rail planning into something that is considered different from normal transit. This is something different. This is stuff being done by committee. And again, in Brooklyn, they have different errors where, for stupid reasons, they did not include what everyone wanted, which was to put a bus in the tunnel between Red Hook and Lower Manhattan. But anyway, and they're also insufficiently bundling it with aggressive speed increases, which forces other compromises. But in Queens, the scope for speed increases is there, but it's smaller because, first of all, they are doing some stop consolidation, and second, there's less traffic in Queens, so dedicated lanes give you extra speed that you can then spend on higher service kilometers, but by a smaller margin than in Brooklyn. So in Brooklyn, a lot of it is neighborhood NIMBYs are pro car and don't want to seat space. And NOC DOT doesn't like the idea of redoing some street things to make the streets more bus than car centric, which are not just bus lanes, stuff like two-waying Nostrand. But anyway, so yeah, there's a lot of high transit demand in Park Slope and in this part of Brooklyn, but it's all on the subway. So the bus demand is surprisingly not quite, but close to constant between here and here. Some of the busiest buses are crosstowns that are pretty far out. The B6 and B20 is not B20. The B6 and B82 complex. They're both roughly here to here. One goes on Flatlands, I think that's the B6. One goes on Kings Highway, which is B82. They're pretty close to each other. They're both, maybe not now, but pre-corona they were top 10 routes in the city. And the B1, which is not quite, it's, I think this, and then meanders to Brighton Beach, and then some rush hour buses do only this to the community college, so it's this route. So again, lots and lots of demand. So the part of the bus redesign process in smaller American towns, the ones that are hiring Jarrett Walker because they're small and therefore don't have a stable of local only consultants. Like New York is not hiring Jarrett Walker, as far as I can tell. New York has its own in-city consultants, which can live entirely off of New York consultant contracts, or maybe they get New Jersey Transit, I'm not sure, but it's something very local. So that's why the Jarrett Walker and Associates bus redesigns in the United States have always been in places that don't really have public transit, things like San Jose or Richmond, rather than Boston or San Francisco proper. He's doing Suffolk County on Long Island, again with no LIRR connections because siloed planning. And what this means is that the part where Jarrett likes to do these seminars where he guides people toward the decision of prioritizing places where people actually ride transit over places where they don't, and they just want to say they have buses to get people who vote for Democrats to live there. They're never going to ride the trains, maybe trains they would ride, but certainly never going to ride the buses. But they want to say we have buses because green. Marketing. Marketing at the expense of other people, because these resources could go to cities where people actually use the buses in the same metro areas. These are, again, because these are places that are very peripheral. So again, we're not talking about New York. We're talking about outer Long Island. I've heard the same thing, not as in the context of a redesign, but in the context of rich liberal suburbanites wanting to say that they have buses in Pioneer Valley. So in all of these places, city center, outside 4 blocks where people walk, is very poor. So the workhorse buses in Springfield, for example, are all serving very low income clientele. Worcester, and it's the same all over the Northeast. The places in the Northeast where you see rich enough city centers that that you will see an even vaguely middle class person take the bus. These are the largest cities. That's New York, Boston. Maybe you can get some hipster in New Haven or Providence, but that's very unlikely, and the bus ridership in New Haven and Providence is very low income. So we're talking Boston, New York, DC, maybe parts of Philly, parts of Chicago, and so these are again big cities that have their own stable of consultants. So because Jarrett is an outsider to the system, he mostly just essentially guides people toward serving the core routes better. And so a lot of those redesigns are really just gutting buses that run a couple times a day, serving places that some developer tried to lobby. I mean, the buses are, then maybe the developer successfully lobbied the city to build the bus there, to run the bus there. Nobody in the development ever rides the bus, but then they can say, but then for marketing purposes, they can say we're close to a bus. So that aspect is completely absent from Brooklyn because of this uh, because of this isotropy, and in Queens the issue is that it is partly there. Not exactly. It's like inner. Because because the London NIMBYs keep saying how much they are pro-environmentalism, and then they are never on the bus. I'm actually kind of curious whether. So bear in mind, in London there is a rather. Large difference in the fare between the buses and the trains. In the North American examples that I'm going to get into, there either is full fare integration, not including commuter rail, or something very close to it. So that maybe the fares are not the same, but they're very close. So in London, a lot of the class issues of this come from fares, because. What? Oh God. Oh God, I'm sorry. Would you be interested in having the Berlin housing stock? Mid-rises, so much more, so much higher density, very good insulation. We have more or less the best insulation in Europe. You guys have more or less the worst. Point axis blocks, of course. Tilt and turn windows. We do have something in Berlin that may, I want to say may offend parts of the United Kingdom, namely a lot of trans and genderqueer people, but I will at least give Britain credit when in Britain it appears that it is a criminal offense to murder a trans or genderqueer person, and in, for example, the United States it appears not to be. So, if you want to know what I'm talking about, Google this. You can even see the headlines. Anyway, so so going back to the country where it is kind of legal to beat a trans/NB teen to death in school. So in Queens, there's no isotropy. There really is much more transit demand here than there is here. More annoyingly, the transit demand here is extremely peaky. It's bus to train. Train to Manhattan at rush hour. The express buses are extremely peaky as well. The public transit quality in this part of Queens is not convenient enough for people to willingly rely on it. The car ownership rate here is rather high. Bear in mind, it's New York high, it's not rest of America high, but it is rather high. People here generally own cars. And so they did the Queens bus redesign, where they went into a solution that I think is suboptimal, but I understand why they did it, which is a bunch of different kinds of routes, like routes that are, let's call them normal, kind of designed around all day, and then there are something called rush routes, which are just outlying areas to Flushing and Jamaica. And might even do a weird stop pattern that maybe they make local stop on the outer half of the route and then run non-stop to Flushing or Jamaica, because all that matters is the connection to the one place, Flushing again or Jamaica. And and that kind of compromised the system. Essentially, they didn't do the thing that we did in the Brooklyn bus redesign, which was to merge the local and the limited buses into single routes with compromise stop spacing, every 400 to 500 meters, as opposed to locals every 200, express limiteds in theory every half mile, but that's only, so every 800, but that's only on SBS. Usually the other limiteds are kind of weird in that they have local sections and limited sections, and the average speed is still terrible as a result. Uh, yeah. Wait, what? There. Okay, what happened? Oh, was the stream frozen or something for a moment? Because I'm seeing myself not frozen. Isn't this? Oh, the siren. No, I mean I live on a street that is not a real main street, but I mean it is kind of a through street, so sometimes there are sirens. Um, they would be louder if the windows were open. I have good noise insulation. Not perfect, but good noise insulation in this apartment. We'll see how good the noise insulation will be in the next one. Some of the ones I've seen have excellent noise insulation, some don't. We'll see what we got. And yeah, sorry. Sorry, I guess because of the lag, I wasn't seeing it as connected with the sirens, but I thought, wait, did the stream cut out? Anyway, so the point is that the Queen's bus redesign had certain compromises, some of which I understand why they did, so that's not a 2/3 measure, that is, the full measure would be smaller than elsewhere for these reasons. Again, relative to that, I don't think they were optimal in certain ways. The big one, I would say, is that it would need to consolidate the local limited to one thing. Thankfully, I can report very cheerfully that if instead we're adding the assumption that you can actually use the commuter rail as a connection point between the buses, which means within the city the trains run frequently, let's say every 10 minutes. And the reason I'm saying let's say every 10 minutes and not every 5 or 6 is that I'm just assuming that these trains run every 10 minutes. Or rather, for purposes of frequency, let's assume these run every 10. For purposes of figuring out if there's enough space in the tunnel, I'm assuming every 5 because I'm assuming worst case scenarios. So obviously for how busy the tunnel is, you should assume more rush frequency. But for the purpose of what can connect to what, let's say 10, and then if it needs to be, if it turns out to be more than that, sorry, if you need more than that, then okay, there's room. When Devin and I are doing the timetabling, the explicit assumptions for which we have had to sacrifice other things are 6 trains an hour intercity, New Haven to New York, 6 trains an hour local, Stanford to Penn Station. The expresses that are the commuter rail expresses in Manhattan all go to Grand Central for this reason, and then 12 trains an hour on Port Washington branch, which may not all go all the way. They can't go all the way because past Great Neck it's single track. So either 3 trains in 4 turn and 1 train every 20 minutes goes to Port Washington, or I don't know, maybe half the trains turn in Flushing, half the trains turn here. That can be figured out later. That's actually a very simple principle. The general principle is to when it should get locally limited stop patterns is never. You always gain more from having more local frequency. And if it's the sort of bus route where you're literally at the limit of how much you can run a single bus route without bunching, then first of all, the extra local and express trains, the extra local and limited buses will not help you that much because they're still somewhat interchangeable. You can make them not interchangeable if the limited is very limited, like the 99B in Vancouver. But essentially, you're fucking over local riders for this because if you have something like the 90, so in Vancouver, so I actually wanted to show you a Vancouver example better than a New York example for why the answer to your question is never. Which means this needs to load, and my fan should hopefully quiet down over time. I am consuming a lot of hopium. Anyway, so what is portrayed as Route 7 here is 9th Avenue by the numbering, which has been renamed Broadway, nobody calls it 9th. Bus goes from this point, which is the main SkyTrain connection point, service both on the Millennium Line and on the Expo Line. So you go west, and then past Alma, the main street switches from Broadway to 10th. So awkwardly, there is a double turn, and then it goes on 10th to UBC. Busiest bus corridor in North America. Express bus is called 99B. Runs, I think, makes 12 stops. I think it stops about every kilometer, and is by far the busier of the two patterns. The local pattern is just called the 9 after the number of the street, number of the avenue, I guess. And the rush hour frequency on both of these is very high. In the North American fashion, the local buses in Vancouver they stop every 200 meters. The limited's much less, about every, again, kilometer. Very few routes have limited. So Broadway, 4th Ave, Hastings. I'm not sure if there are others. This contrasts with New York, where they split into local and limited if each one runs every 10 minutes. Whereas in Vancouver, I think they will split only at somewhat higher frequency than that, maybe. But anyway, but even in Vancouver, this has problems. The problem is that it's screwing over the local riders to have such tight stop spacing. The locals should still be running a bus every 400, 500 meters. So the only way you're doing the... yeah, exactly, Fiona. That is... thanks for watching, Positive Sun. So yeah, that's exactly the point. When you have a route that genuinely has multiple routes, and is still at the bunching limit, which is the case on Broadway, there is actually a solution to that, and the solution is build a fucking subway. To give Vancouver credit where due, it is building a fucking subway, but it is limited credit because it's only building half of a fucking subway, because they intended to build it as a subway from the end of the Millennium Line, Fraser, and then curve around here, and then go to UBC, but their construction costs doubled, and they're on a budget limit caused by unwillingness to spend, plus demands by other parts of the metro area for prioritization for their less important bus routes, like low ridership and so on. So they're only building as far as Arbutus. I think it's opening very soon, right? And then and now they're planning to build it as a phase 2 from Arbutus to UBC. So again, they're building half of a fucking subway, they're planning to complete the fucking subway, but it's taking a while. In 2012, they were fantasizing about opening the entire thing to UBC by 2021. Did not happen. So anyway, this is why you should not have this split between local and limited. If you do it New York style, so each runs every 10 minutes, just run them as a single route. If you're doing it Vancouver style, where they're running every 5 minutes each, build a fucking subway. And yeah, the San Francisco, let's just use the word no to describe that situation. No, outer local inner express is also terrible, because it means that you're throwing away all of the short trips. The short trips are very good to have because they're free, because you're not doing short turns unless you have a very large drop off in ridership past a certain point. Usually if you have such a large drop-off in ridership, that's just the end of your subway system. In New York, there is a sharp drop-off in transit demand east of Flushing. There's a subway here. There's no subway here. If you're in a situation like like the west side of San Francisco, so besides the fact that you need to build the fucking subway on Geary, it has not been built because there is high enough demand all the way out to the end. You're not actually saving much by doing short turns, so might as well run the buses on the same boring every half a kilometer-ish stop spacing all the way to the outer Richmond on all of these main routes, and kindly build a fucking subway under Geary. Bonus points if you can do this 9-kilometer line from the VA hospital to Market in a, let's say, 3 billion budget. Let's say 2 is good, 2 is good, 3 is average. Can they do it in under 10 in San Francisco is the question. Given what I'm seeing with DTX, maybe not, but that is a construction cost problem. We're not talking about construction costs. As I said, let's talk about the future, not the past. So let's talk about now what's going to happen once you start introducing commuter rail into this. And I'm not going to do the bus redesign on video because, again, it's serious work. That's like months of many months of full-time work. The point is that I keep portraying Queens as this kind of very bifurcated borough with the subway zone and the non-subway zone, which is still called the two-fare zone. Why is it called the two-fare zone? Because bus and subway fares, I think they were always the same, but they did not have free transfers. They had transfers between buses, but they did not have free transfers between the subway and the bus system until the MetroCard was introduced about 30 years ago. So before that, if you lived past the subway and needed to take a bus to the subway, you had to pay 2 fares, a bus fare and a subway fare. And so this area was called the two-fare zone, and the appellation apparently has stuck despite the fact that there has not been a two-fare zone in about 30, maybe 32 years. I think MetroCard is 92. Maybe 93, actually. Introduced in 93. Yeah, there has not been a two-fare zone in 31 years. But that's a name. However, and the bus system has to go with it. The bus system has to serve the existing density. If there's massive upzoning, it can serve future density. However, there's not going to be massive redevelopment based on the bus network. Second, this is New York. What upzoning? Also, third, even if New York did upzoning, it would not change. Not only would it not make Queens more isotropic, I suspect it would make it less isotropic because the main demand would be maybe Long Island City, Astoria, maybe the Queens Boulevard and Flushing line. So there'd be much higher density here, especially like in the nearest areas, and not where Elizabeth Trump got her start, which was here. She literally developed TOD when the 7 train was just opening, but at the time TOD meant converting farms to like single-family houses and townhouses. Is why Fred Trump was a much lower density developer than others than the other big developers in the city. This is why he was the only major developer in the city in the 1950s to support the 1961 zoning resolution. The others said no, it will wreck our business, and they were right. So the city kept showing that Fred Trump supported in order to portray the developer community as at least somewhat supportive of this, which it was not. And of course, in more recent history, yes, of course, there's a reason why people who want to look at like what a big developer in 1956 in New York would have might have said would look at Fred Trump and not others whose names have been forgotten because they did not beget President of the United States. So I'm setting this kind of divided Queens up right now just to point out that if there were good service, by which I mean high frequency bus subway compatible fares here and here and here and here, the bus system would not look like that anymore, because you would not have so for example, there's a bunch of bus ridership from this part of town. Like, you can see that these are not single family houses. They're not high density or anything, but this is like Bay Terrace. Like, look, these are mid-rise buildings. I mean, yeah, these are mid-rise buildings with a lot of space in between, so the density is probably missing middle. But missing middle density is still, it's on the order of 10,000 maybe per square kilometer. Cambria Heights, which is not like that. Cambria Heights is mostly single family. It's just dense single family and some townhouses. Cambria Heights is 6,000. Which, again, it's not dense or anything, but the average in Berlin is 3 point something or 4 point something thousand. And yeah, that includes parks, and this is just residential. But this is something that, it's not the way the street network looks in outer Berlin, but this density would fit outer Berlin. And so, you can make something happen out of it. And especially you can make something happen out of it because you aren't going to move here or here or here or Q-Card tells us not as far east, but it's between the 7 and the EF, so it's always kind of awkward. So here or here or here or here or here, people don't move randomly. They move because of Manhattan jobs. Or because of jobs that depend on other Manhattan jobs. So the strong centeredness of the job geography means that people still ride buses. Except that now they ride buses like this, or like this, or like this is gonna stay. Or most criminally on Northern, like this. So what you want is to think how having good commuter rail here changes that, and that's mostly just gonna mean buses going north-south instead. So from Bay Terrace, I don't think this is a good enough street network for fast service to Flushing. So yeah, you just go on, I think this is Bell. I think this is Bell Boulevard? Yeah. So you would just go on Bell to the Bayside LIRR stop. Which, if Great Neck cannot turn 3/4 of the train, only half the trains, Bayside is not a terrible place to turn half the trains. Bayside has some ridership, not a lot of ridership, but some ridership. At one point it was the busiest LIRR station in like the 20s. I think this ended when when the Flushing line was built, but there was actually a lot of ridership on this until the subway was built. And then took everyone through much better service, like much better service. And Lower Further, yeah, I know that. That's the Beatnik song, right? Anyway, so so it would be much more like this. So north-south connections that are maybe between the Port Washington branch side and the mainline side. Maybe some east-west things here, just because, yeah, okay, Linden connects you to these LIRR stops, and then you can continue, might as well continue to get to the subway. Like, it's not ignoring the subway. So it's a system that's maybe more interconnected when you look at it with the trains, but looks somewhat less interconnected if you ignore the trains. But I mean, it's a system that's designed to, the system is going to be designed with the trains, so why would you look at it without the layer of the trains? Still a bunch of stuff for JFK, because JFK is a big employment center. Very low income employment centers, airports are, so you need buses. If anything, I think the MTA maybe even overwrites from how many directions you need airport service. because they still think not just about the employees, but maybe that the riders will ever ride it. Be very clear, you live here, you ever fly, you have a car, you're never taking the bus. There isn't enough traffic for you to ever take the bus from here to, I mean, even if the bus had dedicated lanes. Like, I mean, let's just say that they stopped using that. Once my neighborhood of disembarkation in the city changed consistently to queue card and sales, that's when I just stopped taking the airline. Because Night, who sometimes comments here, has a car and will and like volunteers to pick us up because it is that much faster for like late at night when if it's a late night trip, especially like if we're landing like 10 or 11 at night. Yeah, I mean the air train is just not good. Now if we're going direct from here to Manhattan, fuck that. If you're going direct from here to Long Island City, then maybe, but I mean to Q Gardens Hills, no. Yeah, the single track kills the usual, and yeah, I know. The question is whether you can run every 5 minutes to Great Neck and then every 20 to Port Washington, or if you need to step down so that they run every 5 minutes to Bayside, 10 to Great Neck, 20 to Port Washington. Again, to be determined, but the point is that connections like this are going to be good. Bear in mind, there's a problem that the street network is not always the most compatible with the trains, and you can see it here, that you want there to be a Utopia stop and a Francis Lewis stop, but they're kind of very close to each other, so I would not even recommend splitting it into two. So I guess you run a bus here and a bus here, and then you do walkways, and it's going to be kind of annoying, but the walkway here would not even be that long to what we're doing. Like you see the it would be 120 meters. I mean, there are longer subway to subway walk. I mean, 300 is about the upper end of internal in-system transfers on the subway, like Times Square to Port Authority. It's technically 280 between 7th and 8th Avenues, but even the Times Square side by itself is so complex that you need to do a lot of internal walking there. So it's viable, it's just annoying. So something like on Francis Lewis, on Utopia, here you would probably want to open an infill or two, or more. And again, you should be thinking about infill where it hits the bus as well, so that would be Francis Lewis, maybe here as well, which is going to be awkward because it's going to be kind of close to Jamaica Center but not co-located with Jamaica Center, but that's where America is. And again, same thing on these branches. So so the idea is that it would allow moving bus service hours from very congested parts of Jamaica and Flushing toward much less congested parts of Eastern Queens. And these buses, the buses on the Merrick and Brewer, there are a lot of them, and they seem rather busy. And farmers, so like these main routes. So that's something that just walk up good LIRR service would change that demand a lot and make it possible to have very frequent service, even pretty far out, even off peak. And I think people are going to take it because the whole point of doing better LIRR service is that you don't need to be on an unfortunately rather slow subway train, one that's fast if you're going from Jackson Heights to Manhattan, but not if you're going from from somewhere to connect with Jamaica Center to Manhattan, unfortunately. So so something that gives you pretty fast timetables from Queens Village. Okay, so people are going to start depending on transit more here. Austria. In Austria, I know that Vienna has some scarily high model split, but I don't know Oh, it's a cross post. Okay, yeah, sorry. Yeah, the thing about density, yeah, I need to talk about this at some point. Bear in mind, Spain has the highest weighted density in Europe by a large margin. Uh, Greece is number two, separated by a very large margin from both Spain and from number three is like, it's a near tie between like five different countries, and I don't remember which one. And yeah, Spain does have pretty decent model split, I think. I think I've seen like 15 or 16% for Spain, but it may have been 2021, so during the Corona trough. And I don't know what it would be on non-Corona numbers. I have no idea what it is in Greece. Bear in mind, Spain also has the magic bullet of can actually build subways wherever it wants. But yeah, no, density, yeah, there is a connection. There's a connection between density and public transit usage. It's just imperfect. Yeah, it is a pretty cool website. This one. Let's see if I can actually see something, or if it is not so granular at the top end for me to show you what I was talking about in Brooklyn and Queens. Residence per no, it will show all the way up. We just need to let it load. Yeah. So anyway, that's the spiel about Queens, and again, I don't want to recommend specific routes because serious work will be done in that direction. Again, depending on time and budget, different scenarios, like is there going to be a subway extension to LaGuardia? Is there going to be something on Queensland? So this gash used to be an LIRR branch called the Rockaway Cutoff or the Rockaway Beach branch. It is currently unused, and there are two competing proposals for what to do with the land, which is either turn it to a linear park in a neighborhood that, as you can see from here, and here is not one where parks are in great demand, and the other is to restore the trains somehow, either some extra LIR trains or building a short tunnel to connect it to the subway. Just because it's going to be somewhat easier than building an entirely new subway line under Woodhaven. Woodhaven has much more demand. Woodhaven is wide enough you could, in theory, cut and cover, maybe. Woodhaven, I don't know, it's like better for hitting the main commercial nodes, but much more expensive because you do need to tunnel, and also this used to be a junction. This used to be a crossing subway stop, not a subway, a LIR stop. So here the LIR is in tunnel under Atlantic, but there is a platform which is centered here, not here, because LIR to LIR would be LIR to buses and buses. Yeah, okay, so you can see what I'm talking about here, right? Okay, it's not letting me zoom in any further. So in Brooklyn, yeah, there is more density here than here, but there's still a fair amount of density in Coney Island. And then in Queens, there's a lot of intense density around Flushing itself and then west of the park. At Corona and Elmhurst and so on. And Long Island City and Astoria. I think this is maybe less intense because a lot of it is commercial. And then the density here is much lower. This is what I mean by this is relatively isotropic, and this absolutely is not. Now you might wonder, wait, New York City has two commuter rail systems that are not being used for city traffic very much. What about the other one, Metro North? And the answer is, yeah, absolutely. I just don't think it interacts with the buses as much because like there isn't a concept of a rush route in the Bronx. The issue is that the subway in the Bronx goes all the way to the end of the city. The only place that has significant residential population beyond the subway is Co-op City, and it is also kind of far from the commuter trains. So opening a commuter rail stop here, cool, but I don't think it's a game changer for a co-op city as far as bus access is concerned. It is useful insofar as it is much faster. I don't remember how fast. I can check spreadsheets, but there are errors there that I would want to be able to not have to fix every time I look at them. Like there are, like the code has bugs because it's code. And there's a specific slowdown that I'm always adding in through the tunnels to Bus Station. So I mean, in theory I could look at it, I guess. So the upshot is that this is probably a 17-minute trip to Penn Station on the commuter rail. So it is a game changer in the sense that it's much faster subway trip. Sorry, much faster rail trip than the 6 train, but it's not a game changer in the sense of this is much closer to the neighborhood, if that makes sense. The Bronx, again, look, it is not as isotropic as Brooklyn, but it is more isotropic than Queens. There just isn't a lot. Yeah, there's this low density stuff around. This neighborhood is literally called Country Club around here, but in this low density area, look where people would be going. From Throg's Neck, for example, the subway is actually closer than the commuter trains. So yeah, you would send the trains to both. But it's not that big of a difference. Country Club is just literally just, you don't need to run as much service. Whereas elsewhere in the Bronx, not here, but around here, the trains are already being fed. Remember that here is where the trains go all the way to city limits on the 2 and 5 trains. Maybe around Riverdale you could drop some buses to the Hudson line, but are you really going to try to make this a bus connection point? Look at these streets. Can you run through or something? Yeah, people will be pissed, but you can do it, but the buses aren't going to be fast. So you could do it probably, but I'm guessing it's just going to be more efficient to keep going to the 1 to Marble Hill. Again, maybe from here it's going to be nice to drop like this kind of bus, like connecting, like going this and then connecting from between the 1 and the Hudson line, but this is not a very high ridership area. Like maybe here there's more density, but here it's okay, you're just connecting to the 1. And then here there's much more density, but here literally the best place to connect to the 1 is also the place where you're already connected to commuter, which is Marble Hill, so okay. In the future, sure, but I mean that's not that important. It only gets you from here to Grand Central because the 1 does get you to the west side. Also, more importantly, if you're trying to go to the west side and the commuter trains don't suck, take the commuter train, transfer to the shuttle. It's much faster than taking the 1. So yeah, so in the Bronx, I don't think there's as much potential. So a lot of it is that intensely hyperlocal, based on it's because these lines go far and these ones don't, and that's gonna matter. In Boston, there's a little bit of that. In Newton, just because right now the buses either go direct into the city or they try to feed the Green Line, but the Green Line is not in a high density part of town. Whereas what they should be doing is feeding the commuter trains. So again, a lot of it depends on the specifics of where the commuter train to be modernized is and where the other rail services. Oh, Salem is a good example of just feeding the commuter trains instead of going direct on a bus, because Salem has regular MBTA service. Most secondary cities don't. They have their own little RTAs, I think it's Regional Transportation Authority or something like that, which are their own things, and because they're poverty transit, they're planned as such, whereas the MBTA maybe is aware that this is poverty transit, but is planned by people who think of the MBTA as a whole, which is not poverty transit. So from places like Lynn, which is very poor, or Salem, which is not, but also not meaningfully middle class, then in these places, a lot of it is buses just going into the city that shouldn't be doing that, but instead should be feeding these commuter trains. So in Salem, maybe you could do something like what's currently happening in Queens, where, for example, in like Worcester or Framingham, the buses don't go into Boston. I mean, they're internal, which is why they're poverty transit. I mean, from Worcester or Framingham to Boston, you take a train. Framingham is not that rich, but I mean, Worcester is not that rich either. But probably if you live in Worcester and work in Boston, you're either middle class or pretend to be middle class. I mean, it's America, I don't pretend to be middle class, but like pretend with like a stronger case than many other Americans who think they're middle class and are not. But the situation is that if you're doing a working class job in Boston, why would you live in Worcester? I mean, it's like working class jobs are such local labor pools that this does not happen if you work at a pharmacy. I mean, maybe if you work as a pharmacist, but not if you work as a retail worker at CVS. So yeah, this is an example of something very specific. Chicago is another one, because in Chicago, and I think in Chicago there are serious plans to actually start doing that. Because the red line doesn't go all the way to city limits. And there are significant east-west buses to this. I think what they're doing is they're trying to expand the red line, trying to extend it all the way to city limits, so the buses that go east-west here on the grid can go east-west, whereas today they don't go continuously east-west. They actually divert to hit the red line. But this is something that would be resolved if Metro Electric ran better, or if the Rock Island line, the Rock Island District, I think it's called, this one, ran more frequently in rural electric, or ideally both. Trying to think if there's a good San Francisco example, maybe in the southeast of the city, but I don't know whether there's anything around Oakdale. Toronto must have them. Toronto must have this, but in Toronto it's such a relentless grid that the grid's going to stay the grid. It's just a matter of some buses are going to get stronger and some are going to get weaker based on any connections with RER when that actually fully opens. Whereas in Chicago, they normally have a perfect grid, but past the southern end of the red line, they don't they don't go continuously, and that could be fixed either with a red line extension or with better commuter rail service. Philly, I don't know. DC, so DC does not have as much commuter rail, and some of the lines are at this point same right of way as Metro. So like the big commuter rail systems in North America are FRIP. Then Caltrain, but I mean, Caltrain barely serves the city. And it's not something that you could really hang a bus redesign for the west side of San Francisco on. So anyway, that's my point to make about how bus redesigns would change if there were better commuter rail service. Yeah, in DC there is freight, but not on every line. So the Brunswick line has, this is not DC. In DC, when it's loaded, you'll see, the Brunswick line has a lot of freight, but the Brunswick line is also the one that has both sides of the red line on it somehow, because the red line, so the east side, so the red line is very U-shaped. The east side of the U just goes on inner, it's just in the same right of way as the inner part of the line, and then the west side of the U goes in a subway, in a long subway, and then somehow manages to get to somewhat farther out on the red line. No, rather on the Brunswick line. So here it's not going to matter, like how you do commuter rail on the Brunswick line is not going to matter for buses in DC because there's already a metro. The Northeast Corridor has much less freight. There's the Orange Line to New Carrollton, but it doesn't take the same route. So it mostly means, is there going to be some kind of infill here or here that's going to change things? And it might, but it's more Bronx, let's call it more Bronx than Queens, if that makes sense. On the Virginia side, most of the buses are not actually Virginia side. Bear in mind, the buses in the district are not planned coherently with the trains either because they don't have fare integration. And there's such big fare disintegration that the trains are viewed as for the rich and the buses as for the poor, to the point that when they did try to make people connect between buses and the metro and the metro up into Anacostia, people complained that it was racist to make them connect. So for the NEC in DC, yes. For the NEC elsewhere, no. So NEC in New York, maybe on the, so in New York, let's see, on the Queens and Bronx side, we're not assuming infill stations that are not currently under construction for our timetables. So we're assuming no Astoria stop, no Sunnyside Junction. They should open Sunnyside Junction at least. Astoria, probably, yeah. I actually checked the timetables and it is possible. The timetables work out even if on 2 tracks you open both of these. Like even if so even if you open Sunnyside Junction, you don't have pass-through tracks for intercity trains, and you make them share tracks with commuter trains that do this. That's still viable. But so yeah, if these open, it's just a matter of infill, very high density, pretty high density, and junction, and yeah, here you could do a lot of development, but I mean, there's already high density without it. It's just you have the duct, you have the yards that you could in theory do. Pretty high density here on the NEC, and that goes, and then you have New Rochelle. So by the time you need actual heavy redevelopment, you're like past New Rochelle, and it's not meaningfully urban anymore. On the Jersey side, yeah, Sunnyside Junction should have more transit development, but this is literally downtown York. And here again, it's more a matter of, are you infilling in South North Carolina? Elizabeth has a lot of development. If anything, development is encroaching on the right of way of the tracks too much, so it's no longer as easy, between possible to just straighten these tracks. If you want to get around these curves, you need to bypass in a tunnel, and that's expensive and very unlikely to be worth it. In Boston, Northeast Corridor, the innermost part is same right of way as the Orange Line, but from Forest Hills south, it's still urban, if not as dense, and still has stops like Hyde Park and Reedville that could be used by urban travelers if there were frequent commuter rail service. In fact, it would be very frequent just because it's the trunk of a bunch of branches. Franklin, NEC proper, and Stoughton. And then Philadelphia so in Philadelphia the problem is that the connecting railroad is not the most direct. So from North Philadelphia, it's a shorter route to take the subway than to take commuter trains. And the commuter trains could be doing this much faster, but they're actually really slow in this section. But the farther out you go, the more going faster helps. So yeah, you should build a subway under the boulevard. This would also be pretty interesting, I think. And yeah, redevelopment would help, but first of all, redevelopment in this part of Philadelphia like this is very poor. So yeah, you could redevelop, but if I'm a developer, the fuck am I building here when I could be building adjacent to Penn? So there is actually a fair amount of development, and then on the NEC Philly South, again, same thing. It's not dirt poor here or anything, but it is. Here it's a matter of info. Like, you can see that there's a parallel streetcar. No, this one's right. Actually, is there a parallel streetcar or are these all here? I think there's a streetcar route. Is this actually the southernmost? Or is there... No, there is a parallel streetcar, I just didn't say it's this one. So yeah, this is a matter of... It wouldn't change the buses very much. It would just give people faster options. Oh yeah, I mean in the DC area. Yeah, Camden Line, yeah, sure, but once we get to the point of one line, it gets to the point that it raises questions like, do you change your paradigm for just one line, which I suspect is why there's so little movement on the Fairmount line involved, to the point when there is, it is such a series of half measures that nobody thinks of it as like something important. And I guess that's the issue with the Camden line. Also doesn't help that Metro hits College Park, so it's not something where it's going to provide new service that doesn't exist yet to an important destination. I mean, it could provide a second service. It's going to be faster, but it's not. That's not the stuff that big game changers are made of. Whereas, for example, just the Port Washington branch is, or the LIRR main line and branch, or the LIRR main line, or its or the branch, or the South Side branches, or the Metro North trunk, the Harlem line, up to, let's say, Mount Vernon, would be very high quality, fast. Essentially another express trains alongside the express subways, but faster to Grand Central. Are there questions about this? Yeah, so Martha, you are a generally functional, healthy, sane person, which is what you did when you were 20. We both know someone who does this exact stuff past 35. Who I love, but I mean, it is insane to be doing these weird bus-only trips between New York and Boston just for the kicks. I mean, some people rail fan differently. No, I am not. What, today that you're a basically functioning human being? I've met you. Multiple times. No, the card. It's someone else who sometimes comments on my blog and nitpicks me to death, and does the annoying thing of being right when they nitpick me. The nitpicking, no, not nitpicking, the point is that I don't do crazy trips. I actually have like extremely bourgeois travel patterns to the point that if you miss the fact that they don't own a car and therefore do not go to car-only destinations like Schwarzwald and places like that, it's things that I could like talk to like members of Union about, and not appear weird to them. Oh yeah, of course. It said oh is a pro EU party, so let's talk about how through better EU action we could visit. We could have better options for how to get between Germany and Poland, or between getting to Prague, getting to Italy. Getting to Amsterdam, getting to Brussels, of course, to give speeches about how we express concern over. Where is there a war right now? Everywhere there is a war, and it's important to express concern, deep concern. You should see the apartment that I'm looking at. Under what circumstances do I maintain a parallel bus route? Okay. Good question. You keep the bus, probably, if it's not... if it's directly overhead, then maybe not. But, so with Geary is... Like, there are 4 bus routes here, right? There's Geary, which is Geary number 38. There's Geary, Bilboa, Fulton, and California. I think the numbers are 1, 30, 38, and what's the other one? 15, maybe? Also, can we talk about how I am extremely online to the point of having memorized buses that I've literally never taken? California is 1, Geary is 38, Bilboa is 31, Fulton, I have no idea why I said 15. Fulton is 5. Okay. Okay, you put a subway in here, let's say. Okay, so here's what happens. First of all, for most things, people stop taking this and this and this bus. I'm guessing you probably can drop. Okay, the colors denote frequency, which tells me something about ridership. I'm guessing Bilboa would get dropped, and Fulton is gonna be kept. It's too far. It's high ridership. It's too far because this is what 800 meters. Yeah, I think too far. In Vancouver, they have kept all the buses, but the ridership on... Okay, so the X1 and the Millennium lines mostly serve the suburbs, not the city, and the grid is the city. I don't think there's any north-south route that is a proper grid route past Boundary. I'm not even sure I don't remember if there is a bus on Boundary. The grid ends around here. So really when we're talking about what it does to the grid, a subway, we're just talking about the Canada line. So I can tell you that the Canada line so there is still a bus on Cambie. There is a bus on Oak. They are meme buses. I think their number... So there is one on Granville, which is pretty strong. There is one on Maine, which is a top 10 bus route. So Maine to Cambie is a kilometer. Maine to Cambie here is also a kilometer. I thought that this bend was bigger than I guess. So a kilometer out, you can have a subway and you can have a parallel bus route that is still top 10 in ridership in the city. And the top 10 part of it is not because it is because the ridership is coming entirely from this side, because Fraser, which is another 800 meters, maybe here it's going to be a bit more, yeah, 800 to 900 meters east of Maine, that is also a top 10. That is also a top 10. I don't remember the top 10, and also this would be 10 years out of date. Numbers, by far number 1 is Broadway. The 9 is number 3 in the city. So this is both the number 1 and the number 3 strongest bus. Number 2 is the 20, which is commercial slash Victoria. So that is a bus that does a bunch of different things at once. So it is up and down from here, and from here connecting to SkyTrain, to Commercial Broadway, and it also gets you from here direct to downtown Vancouver along, I think it uses Hastings. So this is also a very strong car. Okay, this is kind of far, but the fact that I don't think this is a top 10. I think the top 10 are lumping 9 and 99 together, and like lumping all the routes on the same street together. It's Broadway, then I think 4th. So that needs to be kept, probably at lower intensity, like without multiple service patterns or anything like that. Probably you kill the 84, which is just a relief line for the 99, but you keep the 4, and please do some stop consolidation. And this is what, half a kilometer? Yeah, because it's 100 meters between numbered blocks, numbered avenues. So 100 meters times 5, I guess. So I think it goes Broadway, 4th, Hastings, the 20, which is this one. So I said 4 routes already. 41 is very strong. 49 is very strong. King Edward, aka bus number 25, is very strong. That's 7 that I've said. Because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Maine, Fraser, I don't remember the top. Maybe the 16, like Arbutus to 9 is stronger to remember. So the point is that a kilometer out, or like 800 meters out? Yeah, keep it less. Now, what about Balboa in California? Maybe not. So Balboa is already weaker, so you probably drop Balboa. You probably drop Geary from being this bus every 15 nanoseconds, or more precisely, several trillion buses per couple minutes in a bunch route, to like normal, just show up and go frequency, like every 7.5 minutes or something. And then do the same thing on Fulton, and then California, maybe? Or maybe California you can get away with lower frequency. I mean, you can see it go either way in California, to be honest. I can see it stay because it's like maybe it's like for Pacific Heights or something, or I can see it die because, oh my god, traffic. So yeah, I'm imagining if this is a subway, this drops. Maybe this, I'm not sure. All of the north-south buses get much better frequency as a result, because only they connect to a subway and not to another bus. I can't, at this resolution, tell you how much extra, service kilometers budget you get to from eliminating buses on Balboa and greatly reducing on Geary, and maybe also eliminating on California. what you get out of the connecting routes. I honestly don't know. This will also be very strong across the park, because suddenly, because if it's a pure subway, then maybe if you're on the Judah, it's faster to take the Judah. But first of all, to a lot of places that are not direct on the Judah, like around here, you would bus to subway. Whereas I'm imagining today you Judah to a bus. And then if you're not here, but like here or something, I can actually see a world in which this is faster than walking in Judah. So this gets stronger, this gets stronger. This, things like that. This. 20 minutes on the local on Geary on weekends? Why? You're San Francisco. You're a wealthy city. You can pay, I mean, yeah, you need to pay bus drivers a lot, but you can afford to pay bus drivers a lot. Oh, 10 minutes or less includes California. For some reason I thought this was 15. Okay. Still, why would you do this? No. Yeah, anyway, don't ever do 2010 or 1010. Do 5 on compromise stop spacing, please. Or in this case, build a subway. Yeah, and Bilboa is every 10 to 20, looks like. I think it's that. I think it's the intermediate color, not the lightest color. Yeah, because this is the lighter color. This is the lighter color. Yeah. So anyway, that is what I would say about parallelism, but that's usually a subway question, not a commuter rail question, because usually commuter rail deviates from city streets enough that you don't literally eliminate a bus route. You could reduce frequency on one to, please, when I say reduce frequency, I mean reduce rush hour frequency to off-peak frequency, and run it on every 6 or 7.5 or 8 minutes. 10 if you're very budget constrained, to the point of making service worse. Are there other questions? And because I'm frozen here, I can't check lag. I'm assuming it's a long lag if the internet is being problematic. Maybe not. Yeah, this is a 15-second lag. So are there questions? And if not, we can make it an hour and a half recording. If there are, it can be longer, that's fine. Alright, looks like there are no questions. So thank you all for watching this stream on short notice. I hope to have positive news about getting a new apartment soon, and I will see you once again either Tuesday or Saturday, depending on issues including whether I got an apartment, so what level of stress we have, and availability of topics, work in general. So thank you for tuning in, and ciao ciao.